Let us call the meeting to order. We'll have a moment of silent prayer. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We stand, and we do have a quorum, and we line item, special recognition and presentation.
Yes, sir. If we could have the city clerk read the rules for speaking.
Yes, sir. Individuals wishing to speak on agenda items must complete a sign-up card prior to the item being introduced. Sign-up cards are available on the table. Individuals wishing to speak on non-agenda items may do so. Oh, and I'm reading the wrong one, so I apologize. I just realized that. I apologize. I know. All right. Right. I realized that was the wrong one. Okay. All right. I apologize. This is a city council meeting to hear special recognitions and presentations. Council will not take formal action on the agenda items. All individuals wishing to speak may do so under petitions and requests. No sign-up card is required. Citizens will be given 3 minutes to speak. All sign-up cards and exhibits being submitted to city council shall be placed in the box on the table.
Good evening, Mr. Vice Mayor, City Council. The first item is 4A, which is a proclamation for National Suicide Prevention Month. And with your permission, sir, I'd like to read the proclamation.
Yes.
The official proclamation of the City of Titusville, Florida, whereas September is designated the National Suicide Prevention Month and recognized by the National Association of Mental Illness, and whereas many health officials and the community leaders locally, state, and nationally understand that mental illness is a significant issue of concern, particularly among our youth, and whereas we realize that to address mental health issues requires more open and honest discussions about mental health, and whereas one major hurdle is removing the stigma attached to mental health treatment and discussions, whereas individuals, businesses, organizations, public officials, and many others recognize the importance of emotional health. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the City of Titusville supports the efforts of the Space Coast to provide education, resources for mental health and problems. Signed, Daniel E. Diesel, Mayor. Is there somebody here to receive the proclamation?
Receive it.
Mr. Vice Mayor, would you present? It's right there. Yep.
On behalf of the City of Titusville, we give you this proclamation.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. May I speak for a while?
Yes, you may.
Okay. Mayor, city council members, and city staff, and citizens of Titusville. I'm Patrice Pilot. I'm board member of the Space Coast Health Foundation, and I'd like to thank you all so much for doing this. The Mayor Diesel, Mayor Robinson, and the rest of the city of Titusville have been an early supporter of this annual initiative. We believe in making a difference at the Space Coast Health Foundation, if for nothing else, that it will let individuals know that there are caring people in our community, people always willing to listen and provide help. And you all have always been one of those. I may have a representative from Do It for Hunter, You Matter here. It's an organization founded on the suicide awareness and prevention. They are also supporting us in our efforts to prevent suicide. Has been Palm Point Behavior Center, which is just north of the city of Titusville, who has provided health care for those people in need. Again, we'd like to thank you for being a leader in this effort, and you are showing Brevard County and the rest of the Titusville area what should be done, and we truly appreciate that. Thank you.
And the next proclamation is item 4B, Constitution Week Proclamation. Official proclamation of the City of Titusville, Florida, whereas September 17th, 2024 marks the 237th anniversary of the drafting of the Constitution of the United States of America by the Constitutional Convention. And whereas it is fitting and proper to officially recognize this magnificent document and the anniversary of its creation, and whereas it's fitting and proper to officially recognize the patriotic celebrations which will commence on the occasion, and whereas Public Law 915 guarantees the issuing of a proclamation each year by the President of the United States designating September 17th through the 23rd as Constitution Week. And whereas Constitution Week provides the opportunity for all Floridians to learn about the Constitution of the United States and reflect upon the unique principles. And now, therefore, I, Daniel E. Diesel, by the authority vested in me as mayor, do hereby proclaim the week of 17 through 23 September as 2024 as Constitution Week. Signed, Daniel E. Diesel, Mayor. Is there somebody to receive the proclamation?
We're coming up to.
All right. Who's taking the lead? All right.
John is supposed to.
I'll talk.
Oh, let
Okay.
me talk.
Oh. You got to grab the flag. You got to grab the flag. All right.
Hey, Joe. Joe, why don't you
We got
All
everybody.
right. Someone want to speak?
Yes. Okay, the U.S. Constitution is the supreme law of our land. Therefore, it lays the groundwork for y'all to conduct your business here tonight. So we are inviting you and all the candidates and all the city employees and all the citizens of Titusville and Brevard County to join us on September 17th on the steps of City Hall at 4 o'clock for the ringing of the bells. Because in 1887, when they signed the Constitution, they came out in Philadelphia and rang the bells. So we will be doing that and have a short presentation. But without the Constitution, think about that, if there were no U.S. Constitution. Thank you very much.
Patrice, could I get you to come up with the plaque again? We didn't take a photo. We didn't have a photo moment. That was mine. Bad because I was late. Oh, no. Come on. Thank you.
On to item 4C, which is Brevard Homeless Coalition presentation. Brevard Homeless Coalition Representative and Executive Director Amber Carroll will present information on House Bill 1365, unauthorized public camping and public sleeping, which will go into effect on 1 October 2024, with enforcement to begin on 1 January 2025. Amber, the slide Turner is right there. If you want to sit or stand, it's up to you.
All right. Well, good evening, City Council. Thank you so much for allowing me to come and have the opportunity to speak with you. Again, my name is Amber Carroll. If I haven't had a chance to meet you, thank you for letting me be here. I'm the executive director for the Brevard Homeless Coalition. We are the lead agency for the continuum of care. That is the homeless services kind of network in Brevard County. And what we do, we organize efforts to coordinate funding, priorities, and action to support those who are at risk and those who are actually experiencing homelessness. The reason that I'm here here today is not to ask you for anything. I'm not coming to ask you for money. I'm really just coming to share with you what our local response is to House Bill 1365 and to be a resource for you, because inevitably this is going to come back to you to continue to talk about it, to possibly come up with solutions, and we want to be partners in this with you. So House Bill 1365, as we just heard, was signed into law that is making it illegal to sleep in public property. It gives a citizen, a resident, or a business owner in Brevard County or the Attorney General the ability to sue local municipalities or county for the allowing of people to sleep overnight on public property. And why does that matter to us in Brevard County? We might say that we don't really have a homeless problem, or maybe why do we care about that? So one of the roles that we have as the Brevard Homeless Coalition is that we conduct the point in time count. And I think you probably have heard of that before, but you can see up on this slide, I know out here you guys can't really read that. That is available on our website. It is included in your packet. And I just wanted to highlight a couple key findings from this year's point in time count. We conduct this survey annually, the last 10 days of January. This year's count was an increase of last year of 6%, and the highest count again since 2015. Our unsheltered count is 1,116 people. That is a 17% increase from last year of unsheltered individuals and a 72% increase of people who are experiencing chronic homelessness. And that's people who've been unsheltered for a year or longer, who have a disabling condition. That number matters in Brevard County because that's who you see with your eyes on who's actually unsheltered on our streets. And those are the individuals who are going to draw attention, and what this bill is really created for is to reduce that number. Brevard County is noticed in the nation over the last 2 years. There's an AHAR report. It's a report that's given to Congress on the state of homelessness in the nation. Of the 5 largest, largely suburban COCs in the country, Brevard County has been listed in the top 5 for chronic homelessness in the nation. Florida has made the top 5 list for the last 2 reports. And our numbers are increasing. So in Brevard County, we have to come up with a solution. We have to address this, this increasing population that we have. Another key note is that our the rate at which homelessness is increasing has been directly proportionate to the decline in available housing. So we know that housing is an issue, that we're getting priced out of our homes. We believe that homelessness is a housing problem, and that it's not just an affordable housing problem. It's housing on all levels. It's those starter homes that people can afford to get. It's all of the housing in between, but it's really housing that can address all levels of need. So what are we going to do with the response to this bill? As the COC, we've been putting together a work group of our decision makers in our entitlement cities and the county. And so we did have an opportunity to meet with the city staff at Titusville right at the beginning, first group that we met with, and have since met with all of the other the cities. So city manager in Palm Bay, Melbourne, Cocoa, Rockledge, and Titusville. So and also with the county. And so what we're doing is we're pulling together a group of decision makers to come up with a plan to address this issue. In addition to that work group, we have representatives who sit on the advisory council, Mr. Joe Robinson being one of those individuals representing Titusville. So coming together to say, how are we going to address the problem in our community? When we look at the response right now, Brevard County does not have a single overnight emergency shelter available for anyone. Now, we do have shelter programs, so shelters that exist for people who maybe they're families, maybe they're veterans. So shelters that exist for, you have to have it's a program. It's like a 30-day program. But if for someone is in crisis, law enforcement has someone they need to find a safe place for them to go. We do not have a single drop-in emergency shelter in Brevard County. Somewhere along the line, before my time, we've made that decision to not do that. So we're going to look at that. We're going to look at a multifaceted approach to how do we address this so that not one city is carrying the burden of sheltering the unsheltered, that we look at it across the entire county. And that's our role. And that's really what we want to bring to you tonight, so you know that's happening. We want your participation so that we are together coming up with solutions that can benefit our entire county. So really, that was just a quick overview. You also have another sheet in your packet, which kind of talks about some of the big key takeaways with House Bill 1365. In all of your free time, feel free to read that. My contact information's on there. You can reach out as well. But I wanted to just pause and ask if there's any questions related to what I just shared.
Council member, questions?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh.
Who's first?
I don't know.
Who's on first, Joe?
Huh?
Who's on first?
Who's on second?
Ladies first.
Ladies
Well,
first.
just go on. You,
Okay. Hi, Amber. How are you doing?
Good.
Do you have an idea how many homeless we have in the Titusville area?
Yeah. So the geographical distribution in Titusville this year was about 9% was in the north. In the central, we had about 40%, and the south was 51%. And one thing we do understand about our homeless individuals is that they do kind of move around in the county based on where services are offered, and depending on the day of the week on where they can find support, that sort of
Okay.
thing. But
I'm assuming Salvation Army is part of your group. The Salvation Army?
yes.
We should have bought that building, but,
Oh,
okay.
that was a
Member Stoker.
loss.
Yeah.
That was a loss.
Are you done?
Yeah.
Member Stoker.
Yes, thank you. Okay, just to clarify, when you say that Florida is in the top 5 of how many homeless people we have in the state, is that, I would assume it because we're also in the top 5 of population size, right? You're going by counts, not percentages and ratios.
So that top 5, it is by the largely suburban COCs. So it is a little different. It's not just Brevard County. It's a Brevard County, our continuum of care. So in Florida, there are 27 continuum of cares.
Okay,
So we were categorized because we were a largely suburban COC, and that number was really the chronically homeless number. So that chronic homeless who's a year or longer with a disabling condition as well.
and you might not know this, and that's okay. Are you finding that there are other states that have high populations like Florida does that are lower and are doing better with their homeless populations? I'm wondering how we compare, because we are such a large state, if this is to be expected because we have so many people, or are we doing good, are we doing bad? Yeah,
Yeah, I know that's hard. It's
hard, I
been
know.
California and Florida in in that category over the last couple reports.
okay.
Homelessness is up in our country, and it is because of the housing crisis in our country. So, I mean, we are kind of seeing that all over.
Okay. And then, yeah, Member Nelson mentioned what I noticed as well. The north end, we are a lot less than the rest of the county. But with this bill and us, I feel like homeless people are going to need some space to go, especially with this bill being enforced. And so I guess thinking and hearing your presentation, would next steps be, because I know there have been communities that have tried to utilize like old hotels. Some of those programs have not been successful. So would the next step be this working group that you mentioned to try for us to participate in it to see what would be a potential solution? Like where would we be able to let the homeless know that they can go if they can't be sleeping in public spaces?
Yes.
Is that
Yes.
the next step? Okay.
That is the next step.
Just wanted
Yes.
to clarify.
So do think it's going to require us to put our heads together and come to the table with what is available. What are we looking for in Titusville? What are we looking for in Rockledge? What are we looking for in Cocoa? And us not coming into saying, you need to do this, but rather, what can we do? So one of we're looking at a model. Jacksonville put together a plan for it's like kind of a 12-step approach, and it really encompasses it talks about prevention, it talks about street outreach, it talks about like a large conversion of a hotel, but then it also looks at expanding what we might call shared housing and allowing people to have multiple leases in one location. And what would that require with zoning changes in your area, and just really looking at the whole picture and coming up kind of with an all-encompassing plan. But we can't do that unless we have the decision makers in each
At the table.
At the
Okay.
table. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much.
Member Cole?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that, this is a world problem.
Yes.
It's not a United States problem. It's worldwide. I was talking to someone that lived in Toronto, and they said you would never think that they would have a homeless problem in Toronto. But our police chief took a proactive approach and formed a community service unit, which is 5 officers, and they go out to the unsheltered areas. And they have pamphlets, and they give the pamphlets out for services that are available. Services for those that have drug addictions, those that need hospitals, and those that need housing. I went out with them on one of these trips, and 70% of the people that are out there are drug addicts. They're addicted. And they offer programs. So I'm saying it's a humanitarian approach. And I was really heartened by the humanitarian approach that they used to service our unsheltered community. But it's a worldwide problem. I understand we need to find places, but it's a problem that has been going on for many, many years. And if we find a solution, I hope we do. Okay.
I agree.
But I was thinking that maybe there's some way, and I don't want to put our Titusville Police Department on the spot here, but that community service unit does a fantastic job out in the community. So maybe there are ways that we can work with them to help with this problem. Okay? Thank
Happy
you.
to. Yes,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Amber,
Yes.
Member Cole said that he used the number 70%. Does that percentage hold up nationwide or statewide?
According to our census, the last time it was 31% of those we surveyed had a behavioral health condition. So we didn't see a 70%, but
That's the percentage that it shows from the people that the communities, that's the percentage that is garnered from our community service unit when they do the surveys of the people that they come in contact with.
yeah. So with the point-in-time count data, we ask those individuals, we have the questions about mental health, substance abuse, so that our numbers were different. This year, they were 31%.
Next question, my last question. You may have stated it, but what are the financial consequences if we do not get involved with this process? What are the possible financial consequences?
Well, civil lawsuits can come beginning in January, so that we don't know what that's going to look like. No one knows. So that is totally out of our control. So that right there, if we don't do it, we do know that when they've been talking about the bill, they've said it's not a criminalization bill, that it's not intended to criminalize those for experiencing homelessness. But we do know that 85% of people we've surveyed have been prior incarcerated in county jail and 30% in our state prison. We're seeing camps being more and more cleared out. right now just in response to this. So the cost is, I do think it's going to put a burden on our law enforcement and those, because they are going to have to respond to the complaints. They'll have to cure the reports. And I think that we are not going to jail ourselves out of this. We've got to find a way. But we're going to see a burden in the system that way for sure.
Thank you. Council members, more questions?
Just one more. Do we have a potential spot in Titusville? Do you have an idea? Any ideas?
I mean, with tons of ideas.
Okay.
But I think that really the most effective way to come at those is in conversation about what might be most appropriate for Titusville. And we've really been talking about finding options for the north, central, and the south. And so maybe we decide in Titusville based on the 9%, there's a smaller representation of, there's a smaller solution. Maybe the central has a larger facility, maybe the south has a larger facility. But also we're thinking creatively, like mobile shelter units, like the buses that we could do that have 20 beds on them. There are some really creative ways that we can do this where it's not just putting up where we might envision large, overnight shelters that sleep 100 people, but maybe we've got a multifaceted approach that it kind of spreads it out. So we're open to that creativity, and I think Brevard County is like the example of creative thinking. So hopefully we can get there.
Okay, thanks.
After you have explained it, or at some point, you're going to come back for ask for something
What would be really
specific?
cool, right? What would be really cool is if your city manager would come back with your ask. So that would be.
All right.
He didn't really smile at that, but I thought it was funny. Yes, my hope would be that we meet with this work group, we come up with some options to bring to you to discern and come up with a way forward.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next item is item 4D, which is the stormwater rate presentation by our Public Works Department.
Good evening. This is our stormwater non-ad valorem assessment. So this is the below the line assessment for the stormwater utility. Just to give you a brief background, the utility began in 1990. It was for up until 2005 was a individually billed item sent out once annually. 2010 it transitioned to a standalone bill. Came to utility bills in 2012 again as an annual billing that was difficult to collect and poorly collected on the city side. In 2018, we transitioned to the non-ad valorem assessment process. And just a brief history, in 19, a 2% increase. 20 and 21, we did not have an increase. 2022 was an 8.26, which was the CPI at that time. Last year, 16. So this year, the recommendation is an 18.5% increase, which results in an annual increase of $21.30 per year on a single-family residence without credits. Formal action will be taken at the 6:30 meeting for the public hearing for this assessment. Just to give you a brief projection for the upcoming 5 years, all above double figures. I will tell you that this is an expansion of the capital improvement program during this time to bring it up to nearly a fully funded level during this period. So certainly out years can be adjusted if the council chooses not to push the capital program higher on a funding standpoint. But just to give you a summary of the current year assessment, approximately a little over 23,000 properties will be assessed. First category being vacant, we'll have a 0 assessment. We don't assess vacant properties. The value of assessment is around $4.13 million for the full collection. For rate comparison, this is an updated rate comparison from the budget workshop. These incorporate the 2025 rates of other cities that are noted with stars. Roughly about half have already announced or have assessments going through on public hearings now, so we're able to pull those rates. Additionally, of note, the county today did their assessment for their stormwater utility. Their rates were held where they are now. But we continue to be in the upper quadrant. We do move ahead of Palm Bay slightly. still behind Cocoa Beach, Cocoa and Satellite Beach. All right. So what is the 2025 budget being used for? Roughly 41% of the operating is in operating expenditures. 30% going to personnel services, 14% into the capitalized capital improvements, 10% of the transfers, and a little less 10% to the debt service. The lion's share of the personnel services is salaries and overtime of the staffing, followed by the group health insurance. On the operating side, the lion's share again is repair and maintenance. For the first time this time, if you recall from the budget hearing, we do have some what normally would have been capital expenditures moving to repair and maintenance this year for pipe repairs that in the past were capitalized will now be in repair and maintenance, which is a increase in our maintenance budget for the operating expenditure. The other side of that is the interfund transfers that fund the street sweepers through solid waste and fund the general fund admin fees and IT fees. So from the improvement project standpoint, about 82% of the improvement projects will be held to maintenance, with the remaining 18% will go to water quality. Kind of put that in perspective for what projects we currently have on the books. We have about 3.7 million in projects out there today. About 90% of that is in water quality. The bulk of that is through ARPA funds, through the city's contributions and DEP contributions and the soil grants the city has received. The remaining is roughly 10%. If you add in the $425,000 that are proposed, it brings it up to a $4.12 million capital improvement program list. Again, line shares with the water quality program. In perspective, that is nearly equal to an annual assessment fully. So the benefit of the grants for the water quality side has been highly beneficial to our programs, but we still need the maintenance funds to carry on the operation of the stormwater system. Give me an idea of the kind of the ramping up capital improvements in the current year with the encumbrance of grants. We have pushed, this includes encumbered work to date. We're above 3 million in capital. Previous years, we were obviously much lower for the past 4. Just to give you a little bit of input into what we had to project under Florida Statute 403 a few years ago. We had to do a 20-year needs analysis, give it back to the legislators for the stormwater utility. During that time, we projected and needed annual expenditure of around $2 million to operate the stormwater utility from a capital standpoint. This year, we're funding around $425,000. So to just give you an idea, we're still still shy and playing catch up for the capital improvement standpoint. And the inflationary pressure on capital is still pretty high. We have not seen construction costs starting to come down, as other costs have lowered. Construction has not. We were asked when we came forward at the previous meeting to talk about what the additional funding would be provided by coming to this rate. Provides about $180,000. It will allow us to expand the cleaning and televising existing pipe infrastructure, getting ahead of it as opposed to being reactive, getting proactive, additionally accelerating some of the maintenance replacement activities. Give you an idea, Geosyntec recently completed our water quality master plan. That master plan calls for $12.4 million investment in water quality projects alone during the life of that project. So that's another area that we could start to look at funding outside of grants if we're applying some of the stormwater utility funds to it. The second part of that plan is to shift from water quality to flooding, which would be another $675,000 in consulting fees to get that process started. And that would be a little shift in focus to start addressing flood-prone areas and recurring flood areas. And with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions. And again, we'll be at the 6:30 for the actual public hearing.
Yes, Member Cole.
Yeah, Kevin, my question is, I noticed you said that we do not assess vacant lots.
Correct.
I guess what's the rationale behind that? Because we still get runoff off vacant lots. So is there a rationale behind not assessing them?
The base of the whole utility is built on an ERU, equivalent residential unit, that has an impervious component. So being that they're vacant, they're deemed not to have that component. So
Gotcha.
they're dropped to 0.
Okay. Makes sense. Thank you.
Yes, I have a few questions. I'm trying to remember, I don't know if you have this from last time we were here last year. I feel like when we did the 16% increase, we were projecting that we would go down this year and start lowering. Was that correct?
No, we actually had 18 projected for this year.
We did have that, okay. And then so how confident are we that next year we will be able to go lower? is that based on us being able to start these processes in place that we will?
Yeah.
Hopefully, I mean, obviously there's inflation and there's expenses, but
Yeah, it's twofold. So the development that's happening now doesn't come onto the tax rolls for another year. So there will be additional properties added on an annual basis.
okay.
So we do factor in some growth into that process. We do also hope that as we take a step towards the higher rate today, that does yield a benefit next year to all properties, so the capital can continue to grow. And like I said, the bulk of that driver in those out years is going to be the capital function. I think as we raised our operating this year for maintenance, we're starting to catch up with what we have to do. And we're looking more to get into the better process of proactive response instead of reactive. So,
Which I appreciate, so thank you, and I know that does cost money to do. So when we are talking about 18%, is that saying like somebody's annual stormwater assessment is around $100 now, and it will be around $120 moving forward?
it's 115 today, it goes to 131.
Okay.
136, yeah.
Okay, because I feel like sometimes we see like almost 20% increase, that can be a significant number, but we're talking an annual assessment for stormwater, which I think we've all said is really important, and I think it's important to our citizens, so looking at around 130.
So
Okay.
for a single-family home without a credit, it's $21.30 per year.
And then secondly, so those are for single-family residential, how does that price compare to a business or commercial piece of property?
That is calculated as each individual property. So we kind of take a calculation, it's a very complicated calculation, and try to figure out how many of those single-family homes kind of fit on that property. So if you're a regular property, you have small impervious area, you're going to have less of a fee than somebody who's 100% or 90% impervious. So it's all a calculation.
So we
per-
try to proportion it based on impact,
Yes.
essentially. Okay.
And this is a base rate move, so for instance, property may have 10 ERUs, that's 10 equivalent residential units. They had the same one last year as they did this year in all likelihood. So the rate is changing in proportion. So it's not that they're getting a higher rate, they're getting the same full-scale rate. And likewise, again, the base rate does not take into effect if you have ponds or stormwater improvements permitted past 1989 to have water quality and quantity in them, you get a credit. So all new subdivisions, new commercial properties, all are receiving a credit. So the base rate is reduced to that point.
Okay, and then my last question has to do with the last slide here, the benefits of this, where this additional funds would be going to. Water quality, so I'm assuming that would be water quality in our stormwater ponds and potential runoff into the lagoon. And then the second is flooding concerns for the citizens and development, making sure we have adequate stormwater ponds to prevent flooding.
Yeah, the flooding side is not really related to development, more the developed parts of the city that have recurring flooding. A number of parts of the city were developed in the 60s, have no stormwater infrastructure, have
Okay.
undersized piping. So that's the consultants take is they'll start taking those recurring flooding areas and start looking at how to make an improvement.
So look at our existing flooding areas.
Yep.
I appreciate that, so thank you. That's all I have.
Member Stoker, Member Nelson.
Yeah. I just have one question.
Same color blouse.
Okay,
Yeah,
leave it
we
alone.
coordinated tonight. I just had one question. It was based on a comment somebody made, I think to all of us, that the reason the stormwater fees are so high is because we're paying for the new development. And I thought that's not making sense because the new development has their own stormwater, they're holding their stormwater on the property. And the reason we're having stormwater fees is for the runoff for the rest of the city, correct?
Yes. Yeah,
Sandy's-
paying
Yeah.
for the entire system as a whole.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
there are a number of areas that were developed without a storm infrastructure, the entire Hopkins corridor, the entire Park Avenue corridors.
So
Those
we're just-
areas were never built.
And a higher percentage will go towards the older infrastructure because it
Yeah.
needs more maintenance, more work.
Okay, but we're not like punishing people for having development. With stormwater fees.
No, they pay the same amount. New properties pay the same amount as
Okay,
older
thanks.
properties. They'll get the 30% credit because they have to have a retention pond and hold
Right.
their water. Where some of the older areas don't have that, so they don't get the 30% credit.
Okay, thanks.
And this utility is a little difficult when it comes to comparison. Not every city operates where they staff their stormwater utility. For instance, Melbourne does not pay staff out of their stormwater utility. That is staff of City of Melbourne already. Their utility fee is paid solely for the construction side. So likewise, the county use the road and bridge districts to do what we do with our stormwater staff as far as maintaining ditches and other things. So they use their stormwater utility a little different. So it's not an apples to apples comparison in most cases.
So we have dedicated staff for stormwater.
Yes.
How many people is that? Do you recall?
We're around 19.
19, okay. Okay, thanks.
Question, I want to follow up with Member Stokel's question. What does quality of stormwater look like?
So the quality of stormwater right now.
What does that look like? What do you compare it to?
So right now, we primarily have used technology such as baffle boxes we have a model that says how much nitrogen and phosphorus a certain portion of the city is releasing through an outfall. That's a model DEP accepts, that's been vetted through the DEP process. We take that model, determine where we want to put an improvement that will reduce the quantity of nitrogen and phosphorus leaving that point. So that's how we get our soil grants, that's how we get our DEP grants and so forth. So the quality of the waters and the nitrogen and phosphorus released in the water that exits through these improvements, we're reducing that in a lot of cases by 70% or so to get a larger outfall. That's one of the things we found with the water quality master plan is the next iteration is going to be a lot different. It won't be as many baffle boxes because we've done a lot of those. It'll be more adding BAM to ditches, a little different change in our improvement structure, but it is improving the quality of the water exiting a stormwater system.
So you'll hear the word total maximum daily load, TMDL. The DEP has come up with a number that we need to reach to reduce. We need to reduce the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus entering the lagoon. Once we hit that number, then the IRL should be able to sustain itself and have good enough water quality to start growing the seagrass back and get back to where it needs to be. So our goal, along with the county's goal and every other municipality, is to reduce the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus to hit that total maximum daily load where the lagoon can sustain itself again.
So what I understand is basically water quality to us means the extraction of debris for the most part and testing for the chemical mixtures in the water. Is that what you're saying? That's what quality of water mean to us?
The DEP uses seagrass as the indicator of the health of the lagoon. So they go out and they do transects, the St. Johns River does, and they see how well the seagrass has grown. We actually have had some in the last year doing pretty well in some areas. So that is what they call the indicator as to the health of the lagoon, is the seagrass will grow, and hopefully that will reduce the pollutants in the lagoon to get it to sustain itself. So that's the seagrass transects are what they use as the indicator for the health of the lagoon right now.
So this year or in the last couple of years, to help us with this process, has the federal government or the state government implemented any rules, regulation to help us with this runoff, the condition of the runoff?
There's been a number of changes. There's some new septic rules coming online. Keep in mind that the impact of the lagoon is not only from stormwater. The sewer plant improvements that the city made at Osprey were funded by soil because it reduces the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus released to the reclaim system, which is used on lawns around town. But the state is enacting a new stormwater ordinance. Stormwater rule it's a draft that was drafted about a decade ago that's finally coming into effect. That will change a number of rules, particularly in redevelopment and water quality focused. And then, like I said, septic was a big one. The state is taking steps to require expansion of sewer systems to start removing the septic tanks from operation within the utility areas.
Yeah.
So
I can't remember the date. They'll require either you to have an advanced septic or have to connect to sewer by a certain date. I can't remember what that was.
Good. Very good. Council, any more questions? With that, thank you.
On to item 4E, I'm sorry. This is the fire department's presentation on community paramedic program. Captain David Neld, who's leading the effort, will provide a presentation.
Good evening, Vice Mayor and City Council. My name is Captain David Neild, and I'm responsible for the implementation of our newly established community paramedic program. So today I'm going to give you guys a brief explanation of what the program is all about. So what is a paramedic? Paramedics assess injuries, illnesses, provide emergency medical care, and may transport patients to the hospital or medical facilities. Simply put, paramedic means hands of the doctor when it comes to the scope of practice that has been consistently evolving since the creation of the role. In the 30s and 40s, an unregulated service emerged in the state and local levels. Fire departments, hospitals, funeral homes, towing companies, and volunteers set their own standards, transporting patients to the hospital as a primary focus until after the mid-century. In the 1950s, the beginning of modern EMS was mostly run by funeral homes and operated nearly half of the country's ambulances. So today, if you call 911, in just a matter of minutes, 2 to 7 emergency medical providers will be standing in front of you to aid in your medical condition to ensure you see the doctor in a quick and efficient manner. When you arrive at the hospital, you will ultimately be seen by nurses and doctors that will tend to your immediate medical complaint and subsequently either admit you to the hospital or release you from the hospital with instructions for possible follow-up care, which is where the gap currently exists in today's medical care. Due to a multitude of issues, i.e. a lack of understanding, lack of follow-up, etc., patients are not fully recovering after a hospital discharge. And without the knowledge and resources needed, they again utilize the 911 system, then continue in a cycle of medical care that does not fix their underlying issue, and at the same time inundates the 911 system and ERs with often low acuity patients that hold up ER beds that are needed for more critical patients. Something has to be done, not just to reduce the burden on the overall system, but to educate the community members to finally get the medical care they've been lacking for years on end. Some members of the community may remember when a doctor would make house calls. The community paramedic program is similar to this extinct service as being the extension of the doctor themselves, helping to ensure patients are complying with doctors' instructions in their health care. So, then what is a community paramedic? It's a model of care whereby paramedics apply their training and skills in non-traditional community-based environments, often outside the usual emergency response and transportation model. The community paramedic practices with an expanded scope that includes the application of specialized skills and protocols beyond the base paramedic training. The community paramedic engages in an expanding role working in non-traditional roles using existing skills. So after evaluating the data of the Titusville Fire Department, we have determined that the issues creating the immediate need are the following. Annual increases in emergency and non-emergency calls for service, increased demand to North Brevard hospitals with low acuity incident types, lack of understanding on how to mitigate their medical needs outside the 911 system, and avoidable medical issues created due to lack of resources. It is important to understand that this program is developed and operated based on the needs of the community, which is different in every city and town. So what are the goals? We're going to help the citizens of Titusville navigate through their daily lives without losing their much desired independence. Reduce overall health care costs, reduce hospital wait times overall, educate and redirect community members to other resources available to better suit their needs, and help to enhance services of existing community resources. During this process, we'll perform wellness and vital sign checks, perform fall, fire, and medical risk assessments, and assist community members with obtaining the resources that fit their individual needs. We will continue to evaluate the data to meet the social and medical needs of the Titusville community. Questions?
I was just going to say thank you. A friend of mine has an elderly
Watch out how you say elderly.
neighbor, and I think this would have really helped. She fell every night. Every night the fire department was there to pick her up, and this would have been just a great benefit. So thank you.
Member Cole.
I'm going to take off my city council hat for a minute and put on my parish medical center hat.
Uh-oh.
Are you coordinating with parish? We have a problem with reoccurring, people coming back to the hospital within 30 days because two things. One is they don't pick up their medications and they don't follow the doctor's instructions. Oh, is there any type of program that you have that can do wellness checks for these people that are released? And basically, when we release them, we know that they probably are not going to follow the guidelines, but we have to release them. So are there any type of wellness checks that we can do to help that?
Well, so part of this, we've kind of partnered with Parish Medical Center's Transition of Care team, which I've been actively having conversations with their team about the resources that are available to them. So they've pinpointed some clients of concern that I'll try to meet with. But as far as the rest of it goes, it's mostly going to be meeting with these clients and then talking with their primary care doctor to try to make sure that they fully understand what is going on at home. Because oftentimes that's part of where the gap is.
It is.
Is that, client, patient, what have you, goes to see their doctor, the doctor gives them things, and they tell part of the story. But they're not getting the whole picture. So by a program like this coming in, being able to have a relationship with the doctor to explain, actually, this is what's happening at home, they can have a better understanding of the situation to prescribe and have a care plan that's going to be more fit their needs.
Okay, hey, thank you. I think it's a great program. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Member Stoker.
Yep. How did you guys come up with this idea?
This isn't a brand new idea for us. This has been actually a program that's been around for 20 years in different parts of the country. And what's really created the need is seeing the volume go up and the number of 911 calls go up. ER wait times have gone up, and we feel like there's reason to get involved and help people be able to live their daily lives out.
Are you guys partnering with the county at all?
Yes.
To-
Yeah. So I've shadowed Brevard County. I met with them and I talked to them regularly about the needs in the overall county, and we kind of work hand in hand.
Okay. And I would just like to say thank you, because I feel like whenever you guys or the police department does a presentation, we've done something right to create a culture where you guys have the ability to think outside the box, to see what other communities are doing and to try something. And I just really appreciate that, because I don't take that for granted.
Thank you.
So.
Yes, again, I want to thank you, and I love that spirit that the fire department and the police department had, that desire to be the best that they can be. I like that. And I thank all of you for what you do and the heart that you put into it. Because in the business that you're in, one of the greatest qualities that you can have is that you care. Thank you. What else? And you can pass that on to John over there that I said that.
I'll tell them. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
On to 4F, which is the impacts of fresh water in the Indian River Lagoon. We have Dr. Todd Osborne from the University of Florida and Captain Blair Wiggins to provide the presentation.
Thank you, Vice Mayor and members of the council for the opportunity to come speak to you tonight. This is something very near and dear to us. We want to just encourage more of what you heard about earlier about stormwater and talk about some freshwater issues in the lagoon that are affecting what we do and like I said, encourage more of this great work that's being done by Titusville with respect to stormwater.
Would you lift the mic up and?
Yes.
So it can project
Is that
a
better?
little bit better.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just to put in perspective what we were talking about earlier, what was being mentioned about stormwater and why it's so important, the vehicles to get that nitrogen and phosphorus that were mentioned to the lagoon that cause all these problems that we know about are things like fertilizer use, and that is mobilized by stormwater. What do I point out? Okay. We also have septic system issues, right, that encourage more nutrient inputs. And then finally, the stormwater system itself moves a lot of those things through the environment and into the lagoon. And we've seen the results of that, which are kind of devastating. They affect us on all levels, both enjoyment of the environment and the economy. And so our program has been addressing that particular issue in the lagoon. And I'm going to let Captain Blair Wiggins talk about the Indian River Clam project just a few minutes and kind of tell him or let him tell you what we're doing, so that then we can relate that back to the issue of stormwater.
How y'all doing tonight? Thanks for letting me come in and talk. I'm Captain Blair Wiggins, and I'm the one that started the Indian River Clam Restoration Project. Hopefully y'all have heard about it going on the past 5 years. We've surpassed our 45 million clam release mark that we've strived for. We've got a new initiative going with CCA right now, which is a billion clam initiative. And one thing that the clam project was really started for was to improve the water clarity, to get our seagrasses and all of our life back in the water. And one thing that I noticed that I've probably spent as much time in the water out here in the Indian River Lagoon as I have on land my whole life. And one thing I've noticed is when I was a kid that, every time I took Dad's boat out, I would have to wash it off every time, because at the end of the day, even if I was out for 4 hours, I would have caked salt on my boat. And the salinity of the river is really what we need to concentrate on now, because the salinity is so far down, and Dr. Todd will get into this a little bit later. But so far this past year, our salinity's been great. We've got oysters growing. I've gotten salt caked on my boat a couple times, but that's due to the lack of rain that we've had. Wish I could say it was due to great water that we've had come in, but it's due to the lack of rain that we've had. But the salinity factor with the stormwater runoff, it's great you guys are getting the nitrogen out of the water. The new project y'all have that just got completed, great project, and for what you have in plans for the future for Max Brewer Causeways, quite it's a step in the right direction. Titusville here is the first city on the Indian River, so everybody needs to follow suit what you guys are doing as far as, taking care of your stormwater. What we need is to figure out some way to control the salinity, because with all the projects that we've got going out there, the seagrass projects, the clam restoration, the oyster restoration, all the projects that are going out there right now are going to be for naught unless we can control the salinity out there. With all the new rooftops, parking lots, and roads out there, the water's making its way faster to the Indian River Lagoon, which pretty much, if we have a great salinity, for 6 months, everything's growing great. We got our baby oysters, we got our baby clams growing. We get any type of a tropical storm that comes in, it's going to deluge the Indian River with so much fresh water, it's going to put it down to a point of non-sustainability. Those are brackish water organisms that live out there, and they cannot survive down, and he can give you the numbers on that, but they cannot survive the salinity issue that comes in with our rainstorms that goes on. So the stormwater, they've done great projects, headwaters down in Palm Bay with the stormwater reclamation down there. And that's something I know has been in talks up in the north part with Farmington being developed. It's going to be a lot more fresh water that's going to come into the Indian River. And like I said, all the projects that are out there that are doing great right now will be for naught, because if the salinity is not there, we're not going to have the life. So turn it back over to Dr. Todd and let him show you about the salinity.
And that's exactly the point, is that, we've been focused so much on nitrogen and phosphorus by law. That's what we're working on. But we've kind of ignored the most basic principle of this estuary, which is it's salty. And we need that salt back. This figure just kind of shows you where things live and where they're happy. That purple dashed line is what we call the mesohaline fringe there. That's what our lagoon is kind of bouncing back and forth with, right? And you can see where seagrasses kind of fall in that green line, and where clams, which we're really excited about and what we work with on a daily basis, where they survive. And those are survival ranges. They're not necessarily thrive ranges, but that's what they can survive with. And so our goal here is to kind of not see graphs that look like this. I know this is really busy and hard to see from where you are, but everything under that purple line is more or less highly stressful for marine organisms, right? Especially the ones that we're targeting, so seagrasses and our filter feeders, our bivalves like clams and oysters. And up here in your area, I mean, those are 4 or 5 water quality stations that the Water Management District manages right out back here. And they, you can see that there are plenty of incursions that go below that line. And I mean, that's not an unnatural thing, but if you look closely, you'll see some of those figures go from very high salinity to very low. And imagine that stress, on an organism that lives in a somewhat stable environment. These are pretty flashy changes. And we point the finger at stormwater all the time. However, I want to say that you guys are doing a great job here in Titusville. In fact, when I dug into it, I was really impressed with all the projects you have going on. To my count, there's 24 projects over the last several years, covering about 7,500 acres of watershed, which is huge, and that's great. Removing 27,000 pounds of nitrogen a year. So kudos right off the bat. This is not a complaint. I'm very happy with this, and it's very good. And all the different types of things that are used: detention basins, stormwater swales, dry detention, and then at the end is wet detention. I want to draw a distinction between those. The first 3, more or less, are letting water basically infiltrate into the ground, and at some point it's going to get to the lagoon, but it does get treated by natural soil processes and natural vegetation processes. The last one keeps water in place. So it's really a wet retention basin, and so the water stays there. And that's the one I want to focus on as being highly valuable, especially to Titusville. So this is your project, the Dre Field Stormwater Park. I give it an A+ if I can grade it, because I think it's fantastic. So you guys are doing an awesome job with this. And it uses all the BMPs in the manual, the important ones, especially the one about holding water in place, meaning that large volumes of water are not making it to the lagoon. And that's really our point right here, is that's what we're aiming for, right? And then there's public use benefits that are tremendous. And I don't want to undersell that. The other thing that you guys are doing that's very forward thinking is using these managed aquatic plants type systems. And those are floating aquatic systems that can be harvested out of your ponds, and their nutrients physically removed. But one thing that we don't talk about with all of these vegetated systems is that they are transpiring water away. So when we hold it on the landscape and then let the plants do their thing, they're both taking up nutrients, but they're also taking that water and putting it back in the atmosphere. And so that water's not going to make it to the lagoon ever. The unsung hero in all of that is concentration gradients. We won't get into the chemistry of this. We'll just say that it makes it work better. The more plants, the better. And that's the kind of message we wanted to give you guys, was that wet detention with vegetation is good. And it's because it increases that evapotranspiration. It also increases the effectiveness of nutrient removal in your systems, right? The added benefit there, of course, is that the lagoon doesn't get that water. And if we look at the local opportunities, this is down just south of us in Indian River County. This is the Osprey Acres Stormwater Park. Now, this is a fully vegetated park, and probably the top of the line kind of project. And so we want to encourage that and tell you that would help the lagoon even more than the stormwater efforts that are going on here. Okay, and there's great value to that. So moving forward for Titusville, we want to encourage greatly that you keep doing what you're doing, because it's really good. It's actually setting the pace for the rest of Brevard County. And I want to say you deserve an A+ for that. If we could prioritize wet retention over the other management options, when appropriate, of course. I know there's a lot that goes into that. We want to encourage that as much as possible, because that removes the volume of water that's actually making it to the lagoon, or reduces it, right? And as Captain Blair told you, all of these things that we're doing in the lagoon across Brevard County are kind of at risk, and the major factor there is salinity. And when we thin it out, we got problems, right? Maximizing vegetation use increases that ET. And finally, there's a great benefit to the public of all of these green spaces. We haven't even talked about ecotourism, but these treatment places, like your Dre Park, are going to become areas for the public to enjoy recreation-wise, but ecotourism for bird watching is huge in Florida. And people come from all around to some of the projects I've worked on in the past just to watch the birds because they're attracted to these systems. And so they can be integrated into the city's footprint with great success. That's our spiel. Can we answer any questions
right.
for you?
Member Nelson.
I do have one question. As for Captain Wiggins, can you describe the project at the Max Brewer Causeway to the people? I mean, I know about it, but I don't think
The
everybody
project at
knows
Max
about
Brewer
it.
Causeway, they're revamping the Max Brewer Causeway that got washed out in all the storms. And in process of doing that, they're getting clams from us to put into the estuary in the right places where the clams can do their job and filter and spawn and hopefully create more clams like we've been doing the past 5 years. The other, you know, a little bit
Yeah,
more about
there are some wave attenuation
There you go.
walls that are going to go in there, or objects. They're kind of constructed objects that will reduce wind-driven wave impacts on the causeway side, as well as seagrasses. So we're going to co-plant clams with seagrasses, something that's been effective. Our research shows that it's a good thing to do together. So there's some environmental enhancement going along with that kind of soft armoring of the shoreline there.
Second question. Where we are now, is there a way to keep the salinity up other than we just don't put water in the lagoon? Which, of course, is going to take time.
There's been studies done, and I know there's some ideas about bringing in culvert pipes to counteract when we do get tropical storms or when we do get a big, 7-8 inches of rain at a time. That all has to be studied and calculated how much, fresh water would need to be let in to counteract to keep it at the right salinity.
Okay, so are other areas doing that? Can we do it?
Up in Destin, they do have a pump. They pump in salt water to keep to Destin Harbor. I know that keeps it nice and salty up in there, but no, nothing here yet.
Okay.
But the big thing to do is just try to keep all the fresh water that we can out that wasn't naturally being put in there in the first place.
Okay. Thank you.
Member Stokel.
Yep. You mentioned that example, I think, in Indian River County. Can you explain a little bit about what that is in comparison to a traditional like stormwater park exactly?
So there's a couple of things going on there. I use it because of the vegetation and the layout of the system, how it's very much oriented for trail usage and things like that. But they also use a lot of woody vegetation, meaning trees, which are great water pumps, right? Now that's a more mature landscape. You won't get that right off the bat, but they created that in a forested system, right? And that park is treating water on one side and actually letting it enter the park itself. And so what you don't see in that picture, it's kind of a little bit occluded, is there's a treatment facility there. And then that's paired with the open park area. So there's a lot of public use of the area, but it's wooded, it's forested. And one benefit of that's more financially based is less maintenance involved in that system. Because these are kind of expensive. I noticed in the presentation before, it was great to see the breakout of cost for these things. And they're not inexpensive, it requires some input, but there are creative ways to mitigate the management or the maintenance of some of those things. And like I said, the more vegetation we can use, and less open mode space, the better for the system, in that it's attenuating that fresh water for us.
Okay, and then just to clarify what I think you heard for maybe help with us on council of things that we can do is to continue to encourage like the stormwater improvements with the presentation we heard today. Try to aim for the wet retention as opposed to some of those other options if we can. And then maybe look for green spaces within our community where we could have some vegetation and larger areas for stormwater parks and then this green space and trees.
Absolutely. Yeah, and some of the mechanisms that are being used right now, like the detention basins that freely drain in the bottom, if they can be converted to standing water wetlands, even better. Now that's a retrofit, usually a clay lining kind of thing, some soil manipulations and those things. But they still have to have flood control, so there's going to be overflow weirs on all of these type things, right? And then we know that we can't avoid that for these large storms like Captain Blair mentioned. However, there's opportunity to use those wet detention everywhere. And wherever we could implement them, that would be great.
Yeah, and I think that's something too, when we have a lot of like applications coming before us, we're always looking at our zoning map, land use map, and seeing kind of what makes sense for the vision of our city and where we could potentially have some of these improvements. So this was very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Member Cole?
Quick question. I'm assuming there is no chemical solution available to increase the salinity in the Indian River. There's no chemicals available that we could
Not
use
at
to
the
do
scale
that.
that it would require.
Yeah.
Many dump trucks full of salt.
Yeah.
That would be a huge endeavor, right?
Yeah.
And a difficult one to kind of.
I thought it might be a
Implement.
tablet or something you can put.
Well, you guys have seen the seagrass response, right?
Yes.
It's been in the news.
Yeah.
Mosquito Lagoon and even Banana River both have gotten like a resurgence of seagrass, and we're really happy about that. Meaning the water quality, as you guys discussed before, is at the place where things are recovering. The holding portion, why you're not seeing it right out here, is really salinity dependent. And that's something the scientific community is just finally kind of, we've been scratching our heads for a while going, why isn't the whole system responding? It's a salinity issue.
There's a lot of people that suggest, why not open up an inlet right here so we would get flushing every day and get all the bad water out? And that would totally change this environment to what it was never intended to be by, whoever created it. But it would change the environment so much, you would bring in so many predators that would come in, and it would ruin what we had.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you because I know that in the 4 years that I've been here, we have gotten some good reports on how we are doing our best to move forward. Staff is always monitoring everything, but sometimes it gets hard. You want to do better, and compared to the reports that we get from the county, we up here in Titusville are doing a lot of good stuff with what we have. I know that we can continue to try to do better, and that is the goal, is to continue to try to do better. There is no miracle solution to our situation. That dump truck of salt, tons and tons, it just doesn't work. And we'll have the Pacific Ocean fresh water if we got all of the salt out of it that we need. But we thank you for coming and sharing with us. We thank you for giving us a public grade, because everyone that is watching us today need to know that we are making a difference with the improvement of Indian River Lagoon. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Joe, can I say this?
Oh,
Can I say this?
One more question. I didn't
This
see.
isn't a question. I talked to the guy that's in charge of construction on Parish Park. And he said St. John's Water Management went out in the water and it is starting to grow seagrass.
All right.
So
Good stuff.
That big breach that we had in Mosquito Lagoon from the storms, it brought in all that nice fresh salt water, the seawater.
Yep.
What that did, it brought the salinity right up to like 37 parts per thousand, which is a perfect environment for seagrass to grow from seed. It was a seed, basically, event that happened in Mosquito Lagoon, and it's taken this long
Yeah.
for the water to filter in the Indian River up into the Banana River. I was in Banana River yesterday, as a matter of fact, and there's a lot of seagrass in Banana River.
Yeah.
So it's looking good. It's just, I hate to see it, all go.
me too.
All die from fresh water. So that's a big thing.
Fingers crossed.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I think that we are ready for petitions and requests. We have any cards?
Bill Klein, 3 Indian River Avenue. I have a petition in that I would like to see a testing program for the stormwater runoff, the storm outflows, and the water that comes from the retention ponds that have direct water flow going into the Indian River Lagoon. We know that fresh water can be a problem. Also, pollutants are a problem. We know that we've done a lot to try to prevent it, but we don't test to see if we really are. When Dray Field was built, an excellent facility, it was tested for about 1 year. They had all kinds of plants planted around the ponds. They had trees. They had thousands. I have a list of everything that was planted. They stopped testing it after about a year, and more than half the plants have died since then. There was probably over 2,000, some of the grasses that were around there that absorbed the water, the muley grass, totally gone. In fact, they were mowed down when they were blooming. I have pictures just before they were mowed to the ground. There's not a stick left. A lot of the trees are missing. Now, no one's testing to see if it's working the way it was when all the plants were there. I think it is very important to test and observe what's going on. Find the quantities of pollution, the quantities of fresh water that are leaving the land. The Indian River Lagoon is not pushing water up from the bottom. The fresh water is coming from the land. The stormwater is coming from the land. The pollution going into the Indian River Lagoon is from the land. I really think we must test and determine what is there. Just taking paperwork and says, we got this pond and it does this wonderful thing, we don't know if it does unless it's tested and proven. Having a baffle box, that's great when they're working good, but are they meeting the requirements? Are they meeting their design criteria? Just saying you have a baffle box doesn't mean it's good, but you got to test it and prove it. And this is what I would like to see done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joe, I'm gonna add this.
Yeah,
Sorry.
on
Bill, when that
Mr.
came up,
Klein.
when that came up the last time, I did call Virginia Barker, the Department of Natural Resources for the county, because she's in charge of the soil program. And my thought is, if this is something we need to do, it needs to be the whole county that does the testing, not just us, because they're in charge of the whole county. And I'm just going to tell you, she said, Jolynn, I know what's going into the lagoon, and the lagoon will tell us when it's healed. And she said, before I spend money on testing, I'd rather spend the money on fixing.
It is much cheaper to test than a lot of the fixing. How do you think when they send up the spaceships, they don't test to see if they're going to come back? They test and prove what we need. What I'm saying is you need to test what's going in. You cannot assume it's not going in. And what I've seen, Titusville does not have water flow from the south coming up. It doesn't have water flow from the north coming down.
Right.
The pollution in Titusville area comes from Titusville. We are responsible for our area. It's not a county problem. It's not coming up from Lake Okeechobee. It's not coming up from Port Canaveral. It's coming from us. We need to test our pollution, not assume somebody's going to bail us out.
Tom Perez, Washington Avenue. You know, I'd like to second everything that Bill has said. And with all due respect to the prior presenters, I think that was good cheerleading, but it doesn't really address our specific problems here in Titusville. Okay, we've known about the salinity issue. I'm a scientist by background. I don't have to be convinced about that. Okay, I do think we have a lot of issues. The grass growing is great, but it doesn't tell you much else. I mean, sure, it'll support systems. But there's other things in the water, especially here in Titusville, that need to be addressed. And unless we test, we can't do anything about it. Yeah, we can see the grass grow, but I wouldn't go into that water, especially here. I live on the water. I'm afraid to go in the water. We got plenty of people here that have been infected by the water here. Thank you.
Next.
Yes. Maureen Root, Port St. John. I am on the board of directors and the Natural Resource Co-Chair for the League of Women Voters of the Space Coast. I'm also on the Executive Council of the Sierra Club Florida chapter of Turtle Coast Group. Both organisations support Dr. Todd Osborne and Captain Blair Wiggins, and we thank them both for their dedication and work they have done for our clean water. And we hope the City Council will take under serious consideration their recommendations and suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lorley Thompson, Mims, Florida. So that picture that you see there, that was taken in the northern Indian River Lagoon up by Cowpen Creek. Dr. Osborne talked about the seagrass transects. That picture was taken by Lauren Hall from St. Johns River Water Management District on the transect that is out right offshore of Cowpen Creek. That grass came up like that in 6 months. I mean, it went from bare bottom to what you see in that picture, and there's miles of seagrass up in the northern Indian River Lagoon now. The shoreline off of Titusville used to look like that. It did. I'm not lying. It looked like that when I was a kid. It looked like that in the 1970s, up until the 1980s. We can bring it back, but we got to do something about all the fresh water that we're putting into the lagoon. The St. Johns River Water Management District is working on some large-scale projects in the south end of the county where they're reversing the flow of some of the large canals. We don't have anything that's easy up here. So, I've talked to several people from the Water Management District. They believe that the solution for Titusville is a collection of stormwater parks spread throughout the city and then to utilize the large wetlands that we've been blessed with. No other community has those resources that we have for holding stormwater. So they want to work with us, but they need somebody from leadership that, to step up and say, we're interested, we want to do this, and they will work with you. The gentleman that's in charge of the projects, his name is Mike McMonigal, and he's the basin project manager for the Northern Indian River Lagoon, and he really wants to work with us. The other piece of paper that I gave you, you hear all the time that Titusville's ahead of everybody else. That is the completed projects just from the Save Our Indian River Lagoon money. And you can see we are at the top, and that is because of the hard work of Sandra Reller. And, she has, every time there's a new opportunity where they release a little bit of money every year, she manages to get a project for Titusville in every single year. And it's amazing the work that she's doing. So you guys should be really proud of her. So thanks for that. If you have any questions about the project on the causeway, I know all about it.
I do.
Thank you.
I do. Wait. Sorry, you guys. So describe the project on the causeway.
Okay. It is a multi-trophic project that addresses multiple habitats. So it doesn't just address one problem, it's addressing shoreline erosion, it's addressing seagrass restoration, clam restoration, recreation itself for human beings. You know, when I was a kid, every causeway in Brevard County had sandy beaches. They were lined with Australian pines. You remember, Jolynn. There were picnic tables under the Australian pines.
Oh, yeah.
And people would line the causeways, and it was a great place to recreate. But over time, erosion and the attempts to control the erosion have resulted in all of our causeways being lined with rocks. Our causeway, there's a total between the north side and the south side of over $12 million being spent on our causeway. And those projects are designed to address the erosion project and make the causeway, you know, so that it can withstand the rising water and the increase in hurricanes and things that we're going to see in the future, but also provide recreational opportunities for our residents. I mean, the causeways are the window to the river for people that can't afford to buy a house that's next to the river, because most of the river shore has houses all along it. It's private property. You can't just drag your kayak through someone's yard and put it into the lagoon. So the causeways are our window to the lagoon. So the wave attenuation devices, you've seen the great big concrete pyramids that are out on the causeway right now. Mm-hmm. There will be a double array of those. They will have 27-meter openings every once in a while so that manatees can go in and out, and humans on kiteboards and windsurfing can go in and out. You cannot operate a motorized vehicle in it, no jet skis. And so the design of those pieces of concrete, you'll notice that they're hollow. They have holes in them. So when you have big waves, we have the longest fetch in the entire Indian River of waves slamming into our causeway, because they can start out at the 528 causeway and come through the draw at the NASA causeway and hit our causeway. It's 21 miles that those waves have traveled to pick up strength before they slam into our south causeway. And and I've told you this many times, it's the most significant horseshoe crab spawning beach in the entire state of Florida. It's very, very important. And so when the waves hit those concrete hollow structures, the power of the waves is diminished. It's knocked out. But the suspended solids that are traveling in the waves will continue, and they'll settle along the shoreline, and they'll actually build a beach. So if it's been properly designed, which I really hope it has, we're going to put sand on the beach to begin with, but those structures out in the river should continue to add sand to what we put there. So we'll always have a beach for us to recreate on and for the horseshoe crabs to spawn on and the shorebirds to come eat the horseshoe crab eggs, and life will be good. And Titusville will be the envy of the rest of the county, because we're going to have the most fantastic resources on our on our causeway. The north side, I wasn't real happy, as you know, with that project, but I've learned to live with it. It will be a more park-like setting with a concrete driveway, concrete parking places, a seawall, but the county had to sign a memorandum of understanding with FWC that they would always maintain a sandy beach on the offshore side of that seawall for the spawning horseshoe crabs. So I see Kevin in the audience. I told Kevin 3 years ago when we started down this path, that not to worry about the sandy beach that the kiteboarders need, that the horseshoe crabs would save our beach.
Thank you.
So, and I want to say this, I want to echo what Laura Lee said. Sandy, you have a nose for finding money, an absolute nose. And for those that don't know it, our budget is probably $50 million, $52 million a year. And Sandy finds much more money than that.
Good.
Hi, I'm
Thank you.
Dr. Kathleen O'Rourke, and I'm an epidemiologist with 30 years' experience in human health. And I'm from a background in public health, and that's important because the thing we've learned about protecting the health of people is prevention is much more effective than treatment. It's less expensive in the end. And we have heard about the importance of having these stormwater parks. That is a preventive method to prevent damage to the Indian Lagoon. And so I just want to encourage you, as you're getting requests for rezoning, think about what it means if you take away the green space, the recreational space, and put in hardscapes. You're going the opposite direction. So please think about this as people are putting in requests for so many projects, and don't rezone and take away that space. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I do one more ask?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Mayor. Laura Lee, is it okay if I donate my photograph to the audience so that some of the audience can see it?
All right. All right. Next, any more cards?
We have Trenton Mansfield? No? Andrew Connors?
This is the first meeting now, not the council meeting.
Okay, okay, there's not an agenda item on here. So, Dorothy Posian, Possien, yes. Oh, for later? Okay.
All right. That concludes that. City manager, if that's well, if all is finished, let's take a 10-minute break and we'll start the regular meeting. Everybody return to their posts at 20 after.